All right, guys, I'm going to go over the parts of the sheep brain as promised, so you guys can study for your practical that'll be coming up. So I'm just going to use the ones that I dissected for you guys here in class today, and I'll go over them. So we'll save a little bit of time. So if you recall, we'll go over the layers first. So remember when I dissected in class, this was around the outside, so this is part of the meningeal layer. So this would be the dura mater here, and then superficial to that would be the epidural space. And then deep to that would be the subdural space. And then we'd have the arachnoid mater and the subarachnoid space. Subarachnoid space is where the cerebral spinal fluid flows. And then right up against this nervous tissue, we would have the pia mater. So we'll go over the exterior components first, and we'll go inside. So actually, I'll use this smaller one here. It'll fit in the screen better. All right, so when we look at this, we can see a couple of lines, a couple of fissures. So this is the median longitudinal fissure right here, and then this is the transverse fissure going this way, separating the cerebrum from the cerebellum. The lobes, we've got the frontal lobe, and these are named just same as the skull bones. The parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. So frontal lobe would be things like emotion, decision making. Let me get back in the screen here. And then parietal would be sensory and motor function. Temporal would be hearing and speech. And then occipital alone would be vision. Back here we've got, this is the cerebellum, and the cerebellum is responsible for voluntary movement, so learning how to walk and catch a baseball and things like that. And then if we look at the dorsal surface of the brain, we can see a few distinct things. So this up here, that's the remnants of CN1, cranial nerve 1, and that's the olfactory nerve, and that carries senses of smell from the nasal cavity to the brain, to the sensory cortex, the precentral gyrus. And then here we've got, this is the optic chiasm, is the X part. The part here, this is the optic nerve, and that goes out to where the eyeball would be. And then this back here would be the optic tract. So visual signals, visual cues from the transducers in the eye, the retina, send signals to the optic, or the optic nerve, to the optic chiasm, to the optic tract, which ends up terminating back here to the occipital lobe, and now you have a sense of vision. Going down deeper, we've got the mammillary bodies here. So we're moving dorsally on a human body. We'd be moving dorsally. This is a sheep, so we say we were moving cephalic to caudal. But in a human being, which we'll pretend this is, if this was human, the cerebellum in the spinal cord would be facing down instead of back. But that's the mammillary bodies, and that's responsible for recollective memory. Missing from this, because I removed it when I took the dura off, would be the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is the master endocrine gland, so it's responsible for it's responsible for hormone production. So let me just remove this guy here. Hope I was keeping it under the screen. I was watching my hands and not the screen. So the pituitary gland is in here. If we cut that guy like that, so that's the pituitary gland right there. Okay, the pituitary gland. And that stalk right there that holds it onto the brain, that's called the infundibulum. The infundibulum holds the pituitary gland to the rest of the brain. All right, if we keep on moving back this way, so if we keep on moving dorsally on the brain, you can see here, so there's the mammillary bodies, and then now we're starting to get into the mesencephalon. The mesencephalon is the midbrain. And then we've got the pons. The pons is here, and the pons is an important pass-through area. And then there's a lot of relay information, a lot of relay nuclei in the pons. And then down here we get into the medulla oblongata, and the medulla oblongata is responsible for life-sustaining functions like heart rate, breathing rate, vasomotor functions, in other words, vasodilation and constriction. Okay. Well, I think that's it for the outside. Oh, we've got the gyri. The gyri are the hills, singular gyrus, and the sulci, singular sulcus. Those are the valleys on the brain. You can see there's like hills and valleys on there. All right, we'll open this guy up now. Okay, so I'll just set this down and I'll point to things. I think that'll work. I think that'll work just fine. Get a probe here. Okay, so we'll go over a couple of things. So this here, the whole outside of this, that's the cortex, the cerebral cortex. Okay, the cerebrum is the entire outside of the brain. So everything above the corpus callosum, that's all cerebrum. Cerebral cortex is the very, very outside part. So that's all the gray matter. Okay, let's start with the ventricle. So here we've got a lateral ventricle. So the lateral ventricles is right and left lateral ventricles, and they're separated by a membrane that was here called the septum pellucidum. And the septum pellucidum is non-neurological tissue, non-neuronal. Okay, just a membrane separating the two halves. The top part of this ventricle is called the corpus callosum, and that is an commissural fiber. So that allows communication between the right and left hemispheres. And then the bottom part of this, the floor of this, is called the fornix, and that allows front to back communication. So that allows communication between the hippocampus and the mammillary bodies. And the mammillary body is right here. Okay? It's the mammillary body right there. And that's recollective memory. And emotion, as is the hippocampus. Inside this lateral ventricle, there's some choroid plexus in there, which you can see right here. That's choroid plexus. And choroid plexus is made up of epidermal cells, and epidermal cells are responsible for cerebral spinal fluid production. Cerebral spinal fluid is produced in the lateral ventricle. It's produced in all the ventricles, but it's produced in the lateral ventricle, and it flows from the lateral ventricle to the third ventricle here through the interventricular foramen. It literally means hole between the ventricles into the third ventricle right here. Okay. From the third ventricle, it travels down here. This is called the cerebral aqueduct right here. The cerebral aqueduct into the fourth ventricle, which just kind of goes around the cerebellum. Okay. We look at the cerebellum now. We can see there's a white-like tree branching structure in there, and that's myelinated axons. The gray matter is the cell bodies, and that's called arbor vitae. Literally translates into the tree of life. Up here we've got the pineal body, or the pineal gland. That's responsible for melatonin production, so that helps you fall asleep. Let's go back down to the pons here. In the pons, we've also got something called the reticular formation, and that's responsible for your sleep-wake cycle down here. Okay, let's go back here. So right here, this structure right here, so this is the superior colliculus and the inferior colliculus. There are little bumps on there. Okay, put them together, and we've got 4 bumps, right? We've got 2 superior colliculi, and then we've got 2 inferior colliculi, and together those are corpora quadrigemini, which translates into the bodies of the 4 twins. Okay, so the superior colliculi, this superior colliculus, singular here, that's responsible for visual reflexes. So if you see a bright light flash, or something catches the corner of your eye, and you turn your head sharply towards it, that's the superior colliculus. The inferior colliculus down here, that's what's for auditory reflexes. So you hear a sound, and your attention turns towards that, or you jump a little bit. That's your inferior colliculus at work. Okay, I think that's about it, guys. So there are 43 items on there again. So there's 3 components to learning parts of the brain. You should be able to identify it. You should be able to know what it's called, and you should be able to tell me its function. Okay. So during the practical, I'm going to have to obviously give you one of those 3 things. Otherwise, you're not going to know what I'm talking about. So I might say pineal body, and then your job will be the other 2. You point to me, and you tell me its function. Or I might say, name the part of the brain that's responsible for sleep-wake cycles, and then you'll point to this, and you'll say pineal body. Oh, here, I forgot this part. So this is the diencephalon. The diencephalon consists of the mammillary body, the thalamus here. And the thalamus is a really, really important relay center. A lot of these neurons, a lot of these axons are going to terminate in the thalamus, right? And then they'll synapse and they'll go somewhere else. So we've got the thalamus, we've got the hypothalamus, the subthalamus, and the epithalamus here. So all of these together. So the thalami all together, if you just say, okay, right here, this is the diencephalon, I'm going to be like, yep, you got it. And then, so that we got right and left thalami, and so what holds them together is the interthalamic adhesion, and that holds them together. Okay, I think that's it. Okay, that was about a 10-minute recap of the brain. Email me if you have any questions. Again, our practical will be on Tuesday. Today's Friday. you guys had today during class in the lab period to dissect your brains and go over them. Study over the weekend. Study Monday. I'll be online with you guys on Monday, Tuesday. When you guys come in, we'll bang out these practicals, okay? Know your stuff so we can get through them all in a period. All right. Have a great rest of your weekend.